we can do the defendant's motion to dismiss the indictment. It's the one.
They're all motions to dismiss, aren't they?
I'm trying to see the difference here. So the one that says motion to dismiss the indictment sanctions for Brady, the Brady one first. Second, the abuse of subpoena power, and third, the spoliation of evidence.
All right, tell me about the Brady motion.
So the Brady motion, Your Honor, we learned through an email from the Commonwealth on Friday, I believe it was, that they had interviewed the street sweeper, Mr. McMasters, and among the information that we gathered from the transcript that the government provided is that on the evening of the shooting, or the early morning hours of the shooting, the street sweeper turned onto Shawmut Street, and everything I'm about to say, he reported to law enforcement. So it was this information was in the possession, custody, and control of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. But he reported the following to law enforcement, that he saw a white SUV leaving the scene and saw someone out of the sunroof of the white SUV with what appeared to be some sort of recording device, a camera or something of the like, out of the SUV. That the SUV drove off, that Mr. McMasters continued, and that he saw two African-American, two black men coming toward the car, toward the BMW. He slowed, he kept driving. These are two bits of information that constitute Brady. They are material to the case. They are certainly exculpatory. They are consistent, we suggest, with other information that we have already uncovered from the initial 911 calls, that there was a report that there were two individuals in the car, one with braids, and some people said one was a woman. By the government's own theory, Mr. Bradley.
Hold on once. Do we know what that is?
By the government's own admission, Mr. Bradley was driving. There's information that there's a second person with braids. Some people said it's a woman. Now we have the street sweeper said, I saw an SUV drive away with a woman out of the sunroof or the moon roof with some sort of recording device. This is potentially exculpatory information that should have been turned over by rule and law to us. There's another bit of information that we learned from this.
Hold on one second.
That we learned from this filing or this disclosure from the government, and that is we got more information about the street sweeper being instructed by the Boston Police Department to empty the hopper, and empty the hopper, to rake through it, to put water on it, rake through it, and then to leave it there overnight so that they can look at it in the sunlight. Again, this is information that would have been critical to the defense that we didn't receive in the ordinary course, that was in the possession, custody, and control of the Commonwealth. And it severely, particularly this SUV with a woman in the car, and Mr. Hernandez clearly does not have braids, is not a woman. Their star witness admits he was driving the car. This is definitorial of what the United States Supreme Court meant when it articulated the Brady Doctrine.
It's what?
Definitorial of what the United States Supreme Court meant when they articulated the Brady doctrine. It's a perfect example of what constitutes Brady, and we didn't receive it.
Help me to understand this. You know all of this because you did receive it. I take it you just received something.
We just received something.
Okay.
Yes.
May I give a couple of background facts?
Well, I'm trying to understand the whole context of this because I don't think the street sweeper is new information.
Right.
Now, what McMasters says may be new, I don't know, but let me hear what you want to tell me.
Just to give you some context, Your Honor. So, as you have already heard, I think, from at least one of the witnesses, I think it was Sergeant McCarthy, there was an indication that a street sweeper was seen leaving the scene shortly after the shooting by responding officers. They called the street sweeping company.
Hold on. Responding officers said they saw a street sweeper?
Correct.
Leaving the scene?
Leaving the area of the scene, yes.
Okay.
So police immediately called the street sweeping company, had the street sweeper return immediately to the scene, possibly to search his hopper, is what it's called, the area that collects the debris that's picked up. Mr. McMasters came back to the scene. He was interviewed by Sergeant Detective McIsaac. There was a report of this. He was interviewed the night of the homicide, July 16, 2012. According to Detective McIsaac's report, Mr. McMasters did not indicate seeing anything about an SUV, and further indicated that he never got any closer than about, I think, 20 or more feet from the vehicle, and he stayed to the far right. Based upon that information, Detective McIsaac at least never requested that the street sweeper hopper be searched for ballistic evidence, and Mr. McMasters was allowed to leave. Obviously, fast forward to this trial, when Mr. Baez made extensive statements in his opening regarding the street sweeper, and the evidence would show that things were picked up, including the gun and other ballistic evidence. The Commonwealth sought to bring Mr. McMasters in potentially as a witness. He was obviously placed on the witness list. Extensive efforts were made to find Mr. Masters and serve him with a subpoena. My understanding, he was eventually served with a trial subpoena on the 13th of February of this year, after the trial right when the trial commenced. At the request of detectives, he eventually came in for an interview, I believe last Thursday or Friday, I think Friday. He disclosed to the Commonwealth that he had already been interviewed by a defense investigator by the name of Mr. Lyons, to which he gave a lengthy statement to Mr. Lyons. We're not sure if it was on tape or not. For the record, we have not received any statement from Mr. McMasters from the defense investigator. Then Mr. McMasters went on tape and provided the Boston police detectives on Friday with the new information that was just cited by Mr. Sullivan.
On Friday or on Thursday?
Friday.
Friday the 3rd.
Friday the 3rd, and we disclosed it to defense on Friday the 3rd. And that is the new information that Mr. McMasters now gives about two things. One, seeing an SUV, and secondly, cleaning out the hopper himself and raking through it to find no ballistic evidence.
All right.
I'm sorry, Your Honor, that was mistaken. It was Thursday, not Friday.
And did you say he was served with a subpoena on February 13?
Yes.
Is that in hand or last and usual, or in what form?
Last and usual.
And the subpoena commanding him to appear when?
Wednesday, March 1st. Which, as the court knows, was the date of the expected testimony of the trial to start. And he did fail to appear on that date. Further background, Your Honor, I'm advised that he did appear eventually on March 2nd. He was provided a new subpoena to appear on Friday, March 3rd, and Monday, today's date? March 6th. And he is expected to testify today.
And did you say that he was interviewed by someone named Lyons?
Correct. He is the investigator retained by the defense.
Did he indicate whether that interview was recorded?
He indicated it was over breakfast, and he saw Mr. Lyons taking notes. He was, as I understand it, unsure whether or not the interview was recorded, but he was not advised it was recorded.
So a couple
And no, I want a little more background. With regard to the interview on the date of the homicide, that is on July 16, that was reduced to a written report?
Correct.
Was that report produced and discovered?
It was.
And that report was Detective McIsaac's interview of McMaster?
Correct.
All right. Then there's some reference to an emptying of a hopper. Was that reduced to writing within a report?
It was not, because it was not something that was known to the detectives that it was done.
Who did it?
Mr. McMasters indicates he did it on his own. He also indicates he saw police officers nearby, but there's no indication that was done by homicide detectives.
Well, was it done by the Boston Police?
No, it was done by Mr. McMasters.
On his own?
On his own, according to his most recent statement.
Is that your understanding,
No,
Mr.
that's all demonstrably false, Your Honor. And a couple things are almost...
All right, you've referenced that the police directed the truck to go down to Frontage Road.
Yes,
And the police directed that it be emptied and cleaned.
correct. And the police...
All right, stop there.
Yes.
Mr. Hagan, is that true or false?
We have no information to corroborate that whatsoever.
There is no Boston police record of officers of any unit being down at Frontage Road.
That is correct.
Did the police ever examine the contents of that hopper?
According to Detective McIsaac and detectives and officers working under his direction, no.
No officer ever did.
To the best of our knowledge, Your Honor, no.
All right.
And according to Mr. McMasters, he did both things under the direction of the Boston police. Took it to Frontage Street, emptied the hopper. They directed him, they witnessed him doing this, and they instructed him and his supervisor, who was there, to do this raking of the hopper to determine whether there was any evidence there. And he says this in his statement. The only thing we got from the government were 2 police reports that indicated very bare bones that there was a report that a street sweeper was there and that they called the street sweeper back, but no relevant information.
All right, good.
There's a third bit of Brady that I didn't get to say, that Mr. McMasters in his interview with the detective on the 2nd said that he attempted to tell the uniformed police everything he knew, and they told him to, these are his words, so excuse my language, Your Honor, to keep his fucking mouth shut or he's going to be arrested. He communicated something in form similar to his supervisor, and his supervisor said, you better be careful and stay low. He says in this interview that he is 99% sure that he told Detective McIsaac on the scene that day about the white SUV and the woman coming out of the sunroof. Our position is at least twofold: that the government can't pick and choose which facts it likes, but that any facts that are material to our defense have to be disclosed. And even if one member of the Commonwealth, police, whoever, one member has knowledge of something, that knowledge is imputed to the Commonwealth. So Mr. Hagan kept saying, we have no information from Detective McIsaac. That's wholly immaterial. The issue is whether this was communicated to any member of the Boston Police Department, and it was. Those are the three. Oh, yes. The other point, Your Honor, is that whether Mr. Lyons interviewed someone, and that interview occurred on the 28th of February, quite by happenstance that our investigator found him. That in no way, there is
What do you mean by happenstance?
That means we looked.
They
and
bumped
looked and
into
looked
each
and
other on
finally-
the street?
No, we looked and looked and looked and finally found him. That's the only way we got just a piece of the information, but not all of the information included in this video. The larger point is there's absolutely no case in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts or under federal law that says because we belatedly find something, the government is therefore relieved of its obligation under Brady. That doctrine simply and plainly does not exist, Your Honor.
Well, who suggested it does?
Well, presumably the claims about our investigator having talked to them somehow absolves the government of its responsibility to provide us with material information that is exculpatory to the defense. It does not. That's a simple and plain mistake.
All right, got it.
All right.
Now we're going to take a brief recess. We are going to figure out what this feedback is from and eliminate it.
I'm on the phone, Your Honor, with FTR.
I'm sorry?
I'm on the phone with FTR right now.
Is it the FTR or is it the broadcast equipment? Let's resolve the feedback.
And we would like to be heard on the abusive process.
You're going to be heard. You're not going to be heard now. I have jurors waiting. The jurors are going to come down, and we continue with the trial. As
Part
to
of the remedy we seek is to stay the proceedings until we're able to figure out what an appropriate remedy is, like bringing back witnesses who may have material information.
and there may be an opportunity to do that. We don't have to do that right now. I want to read the motions. You filed 3 separate motions, each of which have, I don't know, 60, 70, 80 pages attached.
And we included the entire transcript, so it's not simply our view of what's going on, but the transcript is here and the oral, well, the government has the
Yeah,
recording.
that's all fine. You included it so I would read it,
Indeed.
correct?
Indeed, Your Honor.
So I need time to read it. I'm not going to keep our jurors waiting. If we have witnesses, we can continue receiving their testimony.
Then we preserve our objection for the record that continuation prejudices our client's rights to a fair
How's that?
This matter
How?
being withdrawn, without this matter being resolved.
How?
It prejudices him because the jury is getting a manifestly false impression of the investigation, and we have not had an adequate opportunity to investigate what is clearly and plainly Brady information that would assist us in our cross-examination of each. You have crime scene witnesses coming up next. Those are the first 2. We can't confidently cross-examine those guys without this information.
Let's see who they are. Who's coming up? Who's the lineup?
Sergeant Detective Duff. from-
What did Duff do?
Processed the entire 2 crime scenes, being the Herald and Shawmut, as well as the search warrant. And Officer Michael Griffin, who recovered 1 piece of evidence during the processing of the BMW at the Bay. Following him, our intention was to call Mr. McMasters, of which we provided 72 hours notice to the defense. And then after that would be the 2 survivors from the car, Mr. Friere and Mr. Sanchez. We believe that will get us through the day, Your Honor.
McMasters is here?
He's supposed to be here prior to, I believe, 11.
He's not here.
Not right now, but he will be here shortly, Your Honor.
Let me ask, if the police were on Frontage Street, or wherever the yard is, would that be within the records of the Boston Police Department? Would it be on a CAD sheet? Would it be on a cruiser log of some sort?
It should be, Your Honor, but one other nuance here is I believe the Boston Transportation Department and Frontage Road, I may be off on this, but I believe there's different security personnel who aren't necessarily sworn Boston police officers who maintain that lot. Mr. McMasters may have been confused between them and Boston police officers. But we can certainly, again, this is new information to the Commonwealth as well, we can certainly look into all possibilities, assuming, again, Mr. McMasters is correct in his memory.
And did you indicate you intend to call today Mr. Ferrier and Mr. Sanchez?
Yes, Your Honor.
Are they present?
They were told that they wouldn't be needed until late morning, early afternoon.
So they are not present.
They are not. But we could probably get them in relatively short order. Less so for Mr. Sanchez, as he has a longer distance to travel.
Officer Griffin, what was his role? Crime scene?
Correct, and
he recovered what?
one item from the
From
car.
the vehicle.
From the vehicle.
You intend to put him on I'm sorry. Did he recover some item at the scene?
No. Although he did take photographs and process the scene, we intended to do all of the processing at the scene through Sergeant Detective Duff only.
And what is the item Griffin recovered?
A lead fragment from the elbow rest of the rear driver's side.
Is that all he will be saying?
That's all he will be saying.
All right. It seems to me that I would not permit Duff to testify or the crime scene analysis and collection of evidence without resolving the street sweeper. I will not permit McMasters to testify before we've resolved the three motions. If we had Mr. Ferrier, Mr. Sanchez, we could make use of their testimony. I don't think, Mr. Sullivan, that would impact the motions you're now raising. So the only possible witness we could deal with is Griffin, and his testimony, I take it, would be about 10 minutes long.
At most.
And you have no other witnesses here today.
Just for the record, Mr. Ferrier, Mr. Sanchez were here on Friday. We didn't get to them, obviously, based on Mr. Nabolsi's testimony. Again, they're not here now. We intended to get to them after Sergeant Detective Duff, Officer Griffin, and Mr. McMasters, so they will be here later this morning.
Where is Detective McIsaac?
He is, I believe, nearby.
All right. Mr. Sullivan, in terms of what the defense has filed today, does that include the initial police reports regarding street sweeping?
It may not be listed as an exhibit, Your Honor, but I can provide it to you.
So it's not before me.
I have access to them as exhibits.
I've been advised that Detective McIsaac is in the building.
Sergeant Detective Duff, was he in charge of crime scene?
He was.
Has he been asked about any inspection of the street sweeper?
Yes, he had no knowledge of the street sweeper at all.
And he didn't notice the street was nice, shiny, and wet, having just been cleaned?
Well, I'm not sure it had that observation, Your Honor. Again, it's a Commonwealth's position, and Mr. McMaster's testimony that he went to as far to the right as possible, hugging the curb, which again is a good 20 to 30 feet from the area where the car was.
Is it McMaster's testimony that the BMW is stopped in the travel lane of the bridge with the doors open, with two men lying dead, and he drove his street sweeper right across the bridge?
Essentially.
That's his testimony?
Well, in addition, he says a man jumps out of the back seat and falls to the ground. And then, again, he makes the observation of the SUV and two other people running towards the car, which to his position looked like they were coming to help. Mr. McMasters would say that it's their policy and procedure to never stop and to never get out of the street sweeper, and he continued to proceed.
And we heard from Sean McCann that he stopped his vehicle. Correct?
Correct.
How did the street sweeper maneuver around all these stopped cars?
Well, Your Honor, I believe Mr. McCann's testimony, if you recall, was that he stopped alongside the BMW and then pulled up and parked in front of it, so he would not impede the street sweeper. Importantly, Your Honor, two witnesses who you have not yet heard from, who we expect to testify tomorrow, Mr. Kwan and Mr. Gobin, they actually observed the homicide take place. They're directly behind the BMW on the intersection of Marginal and Shawmut. They don't see a street sweeper. So it's pretty clear that the street sweeper comes after the homicide. They pull up, they're the very first civilians on scene, and they call 911. They see the victim suffering from gunshot wounds. They actually see Mr. Bray, they'll testify, still alive when they pull up. They then see people getting out of the car and starting to pat themselves down to see if they're shot. Mr. Gobin and Mr. Kwan, based upon the scary nature of the scene, then left the scene and called 911 from the car. But they never observe a street sweeper.
And again, Your Honor, it's not the government doesn't get to choose which facts are credited. That's for the jury. Our position is that the street sweeper was there first. We simply have a different theory.
First,
by competent evidence, was there very early on, right after the shooting happened. That is consistent with this test. With his, I keep using the term testimony, but what he reported to Detective McIsaac.
All right, got it. What witnesses do I need to resolve the factual issues?
On the Brady issue?
It seems to me I need McIsaac. It seems to me I need McMasters. Who else?
Indulgence. Right. The witnesses who testified that they processed the scene last week, who would have or should have seen the street sweeper, or who may have directed the street sweeper to frontage.
I'm sorry, I don't know that we've heard any witnesses who have processed the scene.
Police officers who were there early on in the scene, if I use process, I may have used it incorrectly, but police officers who were there early on who may have spoken to Mr. McMasters. I know they've said...
Weren't they all asked and said they didn't have any contact with the street sweeper?
Well, some did. With this new information, though, Your Honor, we have a right to cross-examine them and ask them directly about this new information. Part of what you're hearing is part testimony and part what people are reporting to the government, which is not under oath. We also would need the supervisor who can cooperate with Victor McMasters' testimony.
And who's that?
I don't even have a name, Your Honor, of the supervisor. That's something we would have to investigate and figure out.
Your investigator who had breakfast with Mr. McMasters didn't ask him the supervisor's name?
No. Yeah, nor did the police when they interviewed him on Thursday.
All right. Let me see you folks up here. Any juror has discussed this case, read, heard, or seen anything about this case, or had any contact with this case? If you have, would you raise your hand? And seeing no hands raised, I find the juror remains indifferent. I'm sorry we've kept you waiting upstairs. You all came down, and eagerly and noisily opened your notebooks, removed them from the envelopes, put your notebooks back in the envelopes, and how quietly you do it now. And I'm sorry to say that some issues have arisen that I have to attend to outside of your presence. I've talked with counsel about the ability maybe to take some testimony today, separate and apart from issues that I have to attend to, and witnesses able to do that are not scheduled to be here until later on this morning or this afternoon. Having consulted with counsel, it seems most appropriate to excuse you folks for the remainder of the day. That is, that you would not receive any testimony today, but you get the rest of the morning and the afternoon off, and then be back here tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. I'm sorry that this is necessary, but there are issues that have arisen and come to my attention this morning that I have to address with counsel and that are going to take a couple of hours to resolve. I don't want you sitting upstairs with nothing due for the day. It's a more appropriate remedy to excuse you and resume trial tomorrow morning. So we have the bus on its way back. It should be here in somewhere around 20-30 minutes. And I'm sorry for the interruption, but it seems to me it's necessary and unavoidable. So please, between now and tomorrow, don't read anything about the case, don't hear anything about the case, don't see anything about the case, don't discuss the case, and don't attempt to learn anything about this matter or anything having to do with this case or this defendant, pending your return tomorrow morning. Enjoy the afternoon. Jurors are excused.
All right.